going to learn how to draw synaptic connections. We're going to start with the very simple and then work our way up to the more detailed and morphologically accurate depictions of synaptic connections. Okay, to draw a simple synaptic connection, we'll start over here on the left. I'm going to first draw the circle by clicking the ellipse tool over here on the left. If you don't see it, you might see a square here or rectangle. You click on that and hold, and then a menu will pop up and you go down and you click ellipse. Now to draw the circle, you, with your left mouse button, click on the screen and then hold that mouse button to draw the ellipse. Now to keep the proportions so that it's a circle, you now, while holding the left mouse button, click and hold the shift key. So I have both the shift key and the left mouse button held down, and I get about the size that I want, and I release, and that draws a circle. Now I want to copy it, so that's the presynaptic neuron. Now I want to copy that to make the postsynaptic neuron. To do that, I select on the object, I then hold the Alt button, and you'll see this little arrow that pops up just on the bottom right of my mouse pointer. That indicates that I'm in the copy mode. So now that I'm in the copy mode, while holding the Alt button, I will click and hold my left mouse button and drag it down. You notice that it copies that object. Now this is important. I first release the mouse button, and then I release the Alt button, and that copies it. If I didn't do that, it would just, if I release the Alt button first and then release the mouse button, it would have just moved that previous object, but we want to copy it. Okay. So now to draw the synaptic connection, I go over to the line, and I want to click just above the base of the top circle. I don't want to click right at the circle outline. That's because if I make this line really thick, it might look discontinuous, and it will look a little strange. So you want to go just above it, and you click with your left mouse button and you drag it down. Now hold the shift key, and that will keep it in the orthogonal direction, and you bring it fairly close to the bottom circle, and then you release. Okay, so now you have the line. I want to draw this little triangle looking thing, so I'm going to go over here to Appearance, then click on Stroke. Now so this is all the appearance properties that modify the stroke. I can also click on the stroke here to get that same menu. Now I'm going to go to Arrowheads, and I want to click on this one. So notice I drew from here down to here. So whenever I add an arrow on this side, it will add an arrow on the bottom. But if I add an arrow on this selection panel, then it would add it on the top. So I went from here to there, so I want to add the synaptic connection here. So I'm going to modify the right side of this, and I'm going to go down to about a little past halfway, and then now I get all of the arrowheads that look like a synaptic connection. Now, quite simply, I can just press this arrowhead, and that creates that synaptic and like an excitatory synaptic connection. Okay, then I use my direct selection tool, and then I'm back to this view. So then now I'm going to click on this top neuron, and I'm going to right click. So once after I select it, I now right click on it, and then I go to Arrange and bring to the front. And so that reproduces what you see above. And you can also do the open fill. That was a selection, and the arrow button. If I so now let's say I want this to be open filled. So I go down here to arrow, and I want the open filled. But I don't want it to be white, I want it to be green, like the neuron. Okay, how do I do that? Well, I click on the object, I then go up to Object, go to Expand Appearance. Okay, now I'm going to hold the Alt key, and I'm going to zoom in, and to show you what happened, what it did is it expanded this and created a whole bunch of fills. So now I'm going to, and it grouped it, so now I'm going to click on this, and I've got to keep clicking the series. And so now you have two objects. You have the fill that's on this side. So let me double click again. So we have a group of all three objects, and then this triangle is represented as a group of two objects. So now I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to go down here and click on that fill. Okay, so now I've filled that in, and you have the fill if you wanted that, or you can keep it white or solid, whichever one you want. The next synaptic connection we're going to draw is a complex synaptic connection. So many connections in the brain are not only a single component, a chemical component, they also have an electrical component. So in this case, you know, we have an excitatory chemical connection that is also paired with a electrical connection. So we're going to learn how to draw that now. So first I'm going to copy over this, what we drew over here. And I'm just going to hold the Alt button and drag it down. Okay. And then we're going to draw that excitatory component. First, I'm going to zoom in by holding the Alt button and spinning the wheel on the mouse button. Okay, and then we're going to click the line segment tool. We're going to click along this line, and then we're going to hold the Shift key. So I'm holding the left mouse button, and I'm holding the Shift key down right now. And I'm going to release. And then I'm going to... let's go down here. I'm going to start down here. And notice whenever I did that, I used the smart guide to tell me that I'm aligned with this point right here. So I'm going to click on this with my left mouse button. Then I'm going to hold the Shift key, and then I'm going to drag that up and get it to end right at that anchor point. And then I'm going to highlight these two, and I'm going to hold the Control button and then press J. It's going to join that line so that it's one continuous line. Okay, so that's kind of the start of things. I'm going to use the direct select tool, and then I'm going to select on that one point, and I'm going to click and hold. And I'm going to hold the Shift key, and that's going to keep it perfectly aligned. I'm going to bring it all the way down to this point. I'm going to intersect it. All right, so now I want to add this electrical component to it. Okay, to do that, I'm going to click on the scissors button over here. And I'm going to, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, and maybe right about here. And then I'm going to click right about here. Okay, that cuts that line into 3 segments. So now I have this independent component here. So that's what's going to be used to be shown here. Okay, now now I select this line, and then I'm going to go up to Effects, then down to Distort, and then I'm going to go down to Zigzag. Okay, so now it's going to add that zigzag component. I'm going to increase the number of zigzags, and then I'm going to reduce the size, you know, so that it's a little more reasonable. Okay, that looks good to me. So we're going to say, okay. Now we can also shrink this down a little bit so that it kind of gives you a little space to work with, so that I can draw that line from here to here. So, okay, so now I shrunk it down a little bit so there's a little bit of a gap. And I'm going to click the line segment tool. Oh, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click back on this line so that I have this zigzag appearance, but I want to convert that to a zigzag line. So I'm going to go up to Object, Expand Appearance, and it turns it into now a line. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to this line segment tool. I'm going to go all the way to the end until I see the anchor show up. I'm going to click on that and hold down until and then I'm going to move my mouse until I see the anchor show up on the top line. I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to click and hold on that anchor and then drag it down until I see the other anchor. And so now it's close. You see it's kind of disjointed, and you can kind of work on this to get it exactly the way you want, but this is pretty close. So if you look at it, as far as getting the angle just right, but this is just to show you how to do it. You can do it a better way later. Now, if you look and zoom in, you notice that it's very disjointed, and that's going to look pretty ugly if you depict it that way. And I want it to look good, so I'm going to highlight all of these. So you notice everything is selected, and I'm going to hold Control and press J. So that's going to join all of that and make it one continuous line, which looks much better. Okay. And you can also change the appearance of this. Let's say you don't want it to be so sharp. You want it to have kind of the more blunt ends. You can go over you click on the object, and then go up to appearance and stroke. And again, you can also access that panel up here. And then you go down to you can either choose a round or maybe the bevel joint. And that might look, you might prefer that. I prefer the sharper edge personally. But that is how you draw a complex synaptic connection. The next synaptic connection that we're going to draw is going to be a little more morphologically accurate, and you're actually going to draw the synaptic bouton, maybe a couple synaptic vesicles, and so I'm gonna show you how to draw this here. Okay, so first we're gonna focus on drawing the bouton. Okay, so let's move down here, and for starters, we'll draw the shaft. So we'll click on the rectangle button. If you don't see it, click and hold and click over to the rectangle. Then you're going to click and hold and drag it down, mouse down till you get about the size that you want, and release. Next thing we need to do is to build the synaptic cleft, this portion right here. And I found the easiest way to do that is to use an ellipse. So we're going to go over to ellipse tool, and we're going to draw an ellipse about like that. Now I'm going to use the selection tool to highlight both objects, and I'm going to use the alignment and do a horizontal alignment center. Okay, so now we need to connect these objects together. First we need to cut them so that we can join the paths together. So I'm going to highlight this rectangle up here, and then go down to the scissors. If you don't see it, click and hold. You might see the eraser button, so click and hold and go down to the scissors. Put your cursor over the anchor so that the word anchor pops up, and click there. Do the same thing over here, and then now you're going to go down to the ellipse and click on that anchor and click on that anchor. And what that does is that cuts the path at that position. So I can now select this one path here, press delete, select this one path here, press delete. And then I'm going to connect these with lines. I'm going to highlight the two objects and then use the pen tool to do that. So I'm going to click on this anchor and then click on this anchor. Now I'm going to click on that one and go down there and click that one. So now you see the start of the synaptic bouton. So I'm going to now go over to the direct selection tool, and I'm going to highlight those 4 anchor points. So you notice that this anchor point is selected, this one's selected. You even see the little circles that you can add curvature if you want, but we're going to add curvature another way. So anyways, I've selected these 4 anchor points. These are not selected. This one's not selected. Just these 4 are selected. I'm going to convert these to smooth. Okay. And then now I'm going to click on this anchor point, and I want to make these handles. So these are the handles that control how the anchor is positioned, the tangential line of that curve. And I'm going to select one of those handles, and then I'm going to hold the shift key and then move it over so that handle is in line with that rectangle that we drew earlier. Same thing over here. I'm going to click on this anchor, and again I'm in the direct selection tool to do that. So now I click on that anchor, and then now the handle, and hold the shift key, and then do the same thing there. Then I want to bring this handle down just a little bit, and then I'm going to do the same thing over here, bring that handle down just a little bit. Remember to hold the shift key. Okay. And then now I'm going to click over to this anchor point, and I'm going to just modify this handle, and then I want to drag it up. Now if you don't see a handle here, that's because you didn't select it on the previous step, and that's okay. Just go over, and when you select on that anchor point, click this convert anchor corner to smooth. Then you'll see that anchor show up, and then you can modify it. So now I'm going to click on this anchor, and then you notice that I have this handle. Now again, hold the shift key and then drag it up. So now you see what looks like a synaptic bouton. Okay, so let's draw the 2 circles. I'm going to drag this down a little bit, and then I'm going to draw another circle, maybe a slightly bigger one than we did over here. And then I'm going to copy that. So I'm going to select on this object and copy that. Move it down there. Okay, let me center all these objects together. Okay, now I'm going to highlight these two objects. I want to make this continuous. So I use the shape builder tool over here. If you don't see it, click and hold. You might have a light paint bucket or something, but click over to the shape builder tool. And after you've had this selected, you'll notice that whenever you move over, you'll see a whole bunch of dotted lines that show up. So you're going to click up here and then drag it down, and that makes this continuous. Okay. And then you go back to the direct selection tool. Now you have that synaptic connection. And you might say, oh, well, you know, I kind of want to bring this up a little bit. That's okay. You can just click on that and then bring it up a little bit to make it more of a flat, or keep it down that way, either way you want. Now I want to add the little synaptic vesicles. Those are quite easy. You just click on the ellipse tool, click the shift button, and then the left mouse button, and drag. There's another synaptic vesicle. I want them to be the same size, so I use the direct selection tool. I'm going to zoom in, and then I'm going to hold the Alt key, and then drag, and hold the Alt key, and then drag, and then release the mouse button. And then now I have synaptic vesicles. And of course I can color this, and you know, make it I don't know, some color. Yeah, that looks nice. I want to click on these synaptic vesicles. You can make them either white, or I'd probably prefer, you know, maybe a lighter color. So you can go over here to, so I click on the color that, the same color that's the neuron is. Then I'm going to go over here to this color guide tool. Now, if you don't see this window show up, then you can go up to window and then go down to color guide, and then that's going to pop up a window. You can drag it over and then add it to this window. So I'm going to click on this color guide, and that gives you some suggestions of different hues or shades of that same color. So you can click maybe a lighter color so that it stands out a little better. So I'm going to click over here, and there's your synaptic vesicles. So I think I did have white up there, but I don't know, I kind of like the lighter color rather than the light. Now you can go a little further. So that's showing what I drew up there. Now you can go a little further and add a little more 3D effect to it. Okay. So the next section we'll talk about how to add that 3D effect. Okay, so now we're going to add a little bit of a 3D perspective to the coloring of this object. So I'm going to select this, I'm going to hold the Alt key, and I'm going to drag it over. And then we're going to add some 3D shading to it. So I'm going to click on this object, and I'm going to go over here to Appearance and click that. I'm sorry, I would go over here to Gradient and click that, and then click this Freeform Gradient tool. And then I can add points along this to add the gradient. So down here I might want this to show, that color to show. Okay, and then up here I'm going to press the Escape button to modify it, because I'm in the linear portion, so the lines portion, so I have to press the Escape to get out of the line drawing. We'll show what that looks like in a little bit. So now I want to click over to this object. I'm going to double click on it, and then I'm going to click let's actually click back on that, but we're going to go over here to the color guide, and we're going to pick a lighter hue. Okay, I'm going to move this over to there. Okay, now I'm going to press the Escape button, and I'm going to click over here, and now I'm going to double click on that and click this color here, which is the same color as shown over here. Okay, now I want to click there, click there, and click there. Okay, press Escape button, and then I want to click up here. And the default's going to be white, So I don't want it to be exactly white. I want to be an off-white. Okay. Now press the escape button. Now I'm gonna click on this object, and then I'm gonna click over here. So it's gonna draw a line or a gradient line over here. Press escape. And then you can independently, move these around to, make it exactly look like you want. But press escape, press the direct selection tool to kind of get out of it. And there, that gives you a little bit of appearance. And you can add more detail, you can draw a line on this side to make this look a little more cylindrical, but you get kind of the idea. Now on the postsynaptic side, to make that look maybe spherical, you can do something that's a little easier. Go over to gradient, click radial gradient, okay, and then you can go over here, double click on that, press white, okay, then go over here and double click. So to delete, so I just accidentally added a point on this gradient line. I want to delete it, so I can click and drag it away. So I want to click on this. Now I want to, and I'm going to double click on that. What you might have seen whenever you clicked on the edit gradient, you might have seen it go from white to black. And also make sure that you select it on the fill and not the outline. Almost every single time when I do this, it thinks that I want to modify the outline, and I add a gradient to the outline or the stroke, and I certainly didn't want to do that. So just be sure to click on this fill so that it adds the fill. Okay, so I want to double click on this, and one thing to notice is that these points along the gradient line not only have a color feature, but they have an opacity feature. Right now it's set at 0%. Yours will probably be set at 100%. So there's that. Okay, now let's click on that color. Let's make it the color we want. So right there, and you can see already it has that 3D appearance to it. But maybe we want the light source to appear as if it's coming over to the top right, or from the top right. So to do that, make sure you're on the radial gradient, which is in the center, and then go down here to edit gradient, click on that, and you'll see another tool that pops up on the object. What this says is the gradient goes from this point and it radiates out this direction, and it goes as far as this dotted line. Okay. Now you can move this gradient by clicking on this line, this white line here. Click and drag, and then move it up to the top. Okay, so that puts it right up on the top. And then you press escape, you press the direct selection tool. Sorry, don't click away, because notice how it makes that gradient look really strange. Don't do that. Control Z to undo what I just did. And then you can go to the direct selection tool and then click away. So now you have kind of a 3D appearing or looking synaptic connection between two neurons. Okay, the next depiction of a synaptic connection that we're going to draw is substantially more complicated. And so as you can imagine, it's going to require quite a few more steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to Control C to copy it, move over to give us more space, move over here, Control V to paste it, and we're going to start drawing it. Okay, first we need to draw the shape of the synaptic bouton, and I'm going to use the pen tool to do that. So I'm going to left click on the canvas, now hold shift key, and then I'm going to just so I can work with, so I'm going to click along, and I'm holding the shift key mainly to just work in 45-degree angles. It's just a lot easier to draw. I find it's a lot easier to draw the shape that way. So I'm just going to click along. I'm just getting it close. Doesn't have to be exact. Okay. Now I'm going to go along and make this all centered and nice. So first I'm going to draw a center line. Hold shift. So whenever I move down there, you can see a guide popped up. saying intersect, and that's exactly what I want. So click there, hold shift. So I want to make sure this is equal in the center. Well, let's move these closer in, and we're just going to try to get it centered. Looks good. So now I'm going to go back to the selection tool, click delete, then back to the direct selection tool. And I'm going to go along and highlight each individual, or highlight the pairs of anchors so that I can align them so that it looks symmetric along the midline. So I'm going to highlight these top two, click horizontal center, highlight these two, horizontal center. I'm just going to go along the object. You see it straightens things out. Okay, and the bottom two are already horizontally aligned. And so now I want to get it closer to the shape that we have on the right. I might highlight this and bring it 1, 2 inside, and then 1, 2. And then I'm going to highlight these and bring them down so that makes that more of that shape. Maybe bring this down a little bit. It doesn't have to be exact. You know, I mean, synaptic connections look quite a bit varied, so certainly these don't have to look exact. So I'm going to double click on the object, and then now use the direct selection tool, highlight all of the points, and I'm going to hold the shift key and unselect the top two anchors. And then you'll notice when you do that, you get the option of converting these from a corner. Each of these are called corner anchor points, and I'm going to convert it to smooth anchor points. So you see it makes a nice round synaptic bouton looking thing. And so I'm going to click on this anchor. I want this less rounded, so I'm going to move it up a little bit, and then move this up a little bit just so it's symmetric. Maybe a little bit more. Doesn't have to be perfect, just close. Okay, so now that looks roughly the same as what's on the right. It doesn't, again, have to look exact. All right, now I'm going to add the color, so I'm going to put that. So now it looks the same color. And I also want, now I'm going to add some shading to give it a little bit of the 3D effect. You notice that there's a shade on the bottom, and what you might notice is you see a shade along the top edge, and it's sharp and or it's blurred at the top edge and not blurred at the bottom edge. So we're gonna cause that effect. In order to do that, you have to use a clipping mask. So we're gonna create a clipping mask. I'm gonna click on this object. I'm gonna hold the Alt key and drag it away. So now we have a copy of it. I'm gonna remove the fill so we can see, and then I'm actually gonna you don't have to do this, but I'm gonna lower the size of the thickness of the point. So now I click on this object, and I need to make it smaller because I don't want it to be exactly the same outer edge. I want it to be a little bit smaller. To do that, I first need to make this an enclosed structure. I left it open because, I mean, this is a solution, you know, there's no boundary on the top of a real synapse, so I left that open here. I want to close it when making the clipping mask, so I'm going to select the pen tool, and go over here, click on that anchor, and click over on this anchor. Okay. Now I'm going to click on that object, and then go to Object, Path, and then Offset Path. That's going to make it smaller. And I want to type in negative 0.5 points. So that brings it in. Now I'm going to click that, and so if you look, there's now two objects. One's in a little bit smaller than the other. So I'm going to click on this outward and delete. So now I have it slightly smaller, just by a little bit, than the original object. So now I'm going to highlight both objects. I'm going to center and center. So now that object's in the center. I'm going to click. See that edge? So now I can click on that object, and now I have the inner. Well, actually, I want to highlight both objects. Then I want to re-click on that smaller object. So now you can see that it's in a light blue, indicating that I've selected that. And I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say make clipping mask. Hold on. Control C. Don't want to do that just yet. I want to first draw the object, the circle here. Sorry. Okay. And Control Z. Draw a little bit smaller. Okay. Like that. And then I want to make this a darker green. And then remove the outer boundary. And then so now I want to click on this object, then hold the shift and click on this other object. So I want to, click on this other object. I want to right click. I want to, arrange, bring to front. So now that line, that smaller object's out in front, you can see it's overlaying that shaded region. So I'm going to click on that shade, then hold shift and click on that the smaller object that I'm going to make into a clipping mask. Then I'm going to right click and I'm going to say make clipping mask. Okay, so now you can see that I've cut that object just beyond that path. Okay, now you could, since we're doing kind of a cartoonistic depiction of a synapse, you could leave it just like that, having that sharp edge. I kind of would like a blur on it. So let me double click on this. When I double click on it, I'm going to be in this clip group. So anything that I draw outside, so that, remember that clipping boundary or clipping path is right here. What that does is it doesn't show anything outside that boundary. So if I were to draw a line here, okay, and make it black, notice that only the portion that's within the clipping mask is shown. So I'm going to delete that. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to add a blur to this. So I'm going to click on that object, go to Effect, go down to Blur, Gaussian Blur. You can kind of play around with it to see what you like. What you want is this bottom boundary of this object to go beyond that bottom portion of that synapse, because you don't want the blur to lighten as it approaches this bottom boundary. That would look a little strange and you don't want that. So you want to go beyond, you have that blur and you say okay, click away, and you can see you added that bottom blur, and you can play around with that, and if you want to modify the blur after you've created it, you click on that object. So notice how to get in a clipping path, I click on the objects, one of the objects that's within the clipping group, and then I double click on it. So now I click again, and now I'm in that object. You can also use the direct selection tool or the group select. That would work too. Go over to appearance. So I want to change that blur. Go down here. So this is the appearance menu. I can scroll down to Gaussian blur, and I can reduce this a little bit. Say okay. Okay. So that's pretty close. You can play around with it. Maybe I want it a little bit bigger. Click and hold, group selection tool, click on that, and click back on the direct selection tool and make this a little larger. Okay. All right, so now we want to create the synaptic vesicles. Okay, how do you do that? Well, first draw the circle for the synaptic vesicle. Something like, I don't know, maybe that. Okay, now we want that dark green boundary, so we're going to click dark green boundary. Now I'm going to go back to this color that's inside here. We want a lighter color to be shown. Well, we can go up to this this color guide, and then we can click, a lighter color, whichever one you want. Maybe I want that one. So I click away. That creates the synaptic vesicle. And now I want a whole bunch of these. So what we're going to use is the symbol sprayer tool. But first we got to create this as a symbol. So I'm going to go over to the menu and click on symbol. Okay, if you don't see it over here, then you go up to window and then go down to symbols. Click on it, a window will pop up, and you'll drag it and then merge it with the menus over here. Okay, so I'm going to click on this. I'm going to drag it over, and you'll see a little plus sign that shows up just below my mouse pointer. That indicates that it's going to add that object as a symbol. So I click on it. So I release that button, and then you get a whole bunch of options. So I'm going to say it's a graphic. I'm going to keep it as a dynamic symbol, and I'm going to say OK. All right, I'm going to click away. I'm going to now go over to the symbol sprayer tool, and then I'm going to start spraying away. And those are the synaptic vesicles. And if I wanted to maybe change how concentrated these are, I press enter, and I get all sorts of options. And you can change the density, that's how many of these little circles you add given an area. So if I make this lower, they're going to be more spread out. The intensity will add more of the items. The diameter will say how big of an arrow is it going to distribute those symbols. And there's all sorts of things you can do here. And we'll actually later on in the video explore some of those other objects to create new things. So I'm going to say just OK. This looks great. I'm going to click the direct selection tool to select away. Okay, and now the next step is, well, first I don't want this to be black, so I'm going to click. I'm going to make that dark green. That looks better. And I want this, so I want to give the perception that we are looking through a membrane. So that's why I kind of create this little glare. Okay, well, that's to do that. I'm going to use the pencil tool. I'm going to select white, no boundary. I'm going to press enter, and I'm going to move the fidelity to right about here. So not completely smooth, but just approximate. And then I'm just going to draw some, some circles. They don't have to be great. Use the direct selection tool, or the selection tool to change the properties of this. Thought it would already have a fill of white, but it looks like it didn't. It's okay. So I'm gonna now go and draw more of a, kind of created something there. Let's try this again. Okay, something like that. Okay. Use the selection tool to move it to white again. Okay. That already looks really pretty good. And now, I kind of want these synaptic vesicles to go under that to kind of really give the impression. So I'm going to click back on this group, click the symbol sprayer, kind of add a few more. Eek. That wasn't as good. All right, let me change the intensity. Or the 6. Okay, that looks better. Okay, so I noticed that it added, when I use the symbols tool, I clicked on the group and it just added it to what I was already shown. So it just keeps adding and it redistributes the rest of it accordingly, rest of the synaptic vesicles accordingly. That's why I really like using the spray tool instead of just copying and pasting a whole bunch of vesicles, because you can just continue to manipulate it in all sorts of ways. So now I want to make this semi-transparent. So I'm going to click on that, hold shift and click on that. So now I have both selected. Now I'm going to change the opacity by clicking the appearance, going down to fill. Actually, probably better just to go down to this is the opacity over the whole object. I'm going to make this about 80. Okay. There we go. So now it's pretty 3D looking synaptic vesicle or synaptic connection. So now I want to do the postsynaptic side. So I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to do Control G to group it. And then I'm going to hold Alt, copy it. And then I'm going to rotate it around, or I guess I can reflect it. Right click, arrange, or transform, reflect from the reflect across the horizontal. And then now I'm going to drag that, maybe give it a little bit of space. And of course I'm going to, I'm going to I'm going to click on this and press delete so that the other side doesn't have synaptic vesicles. And also I'm going to redraw these, the glare. Right click on group. So I'm gonna delete that, and I'm gonna want the shade to be kind of this way, and I want the shade to kind of go this leading edge here, and then maybe put a shade down here. So I'm gonna double click on this. Remember, this is in a clipping mask, so now I'm gonna play around with. Let me use the direct selection tool. Maybe add. To kind of drag this along here. Okay, add another point. That's not this one. Trying to bring it in there. That looks fine. Doesn't have to be exact. Okay, now I want to draw one on the bottom. Do something like that. Okay. I want this to also be kind of green. I'm going to add a little bit more of a blur. So blur, Gaussian blur. I'm going to add quite a bit more. There. Okay. Something like that. Maybe a little more blur on the top one. Oh, let me actually go over to appearance. Turn down Gaussian blur. Add a little bit more. Something like that. Okay. Yeah. Maybe a little less. Sorry, there's a lot of playing around with these things to make it look just right. Okay, fine. We'll go with that. Okay, so the next thing is we want to draw these receptors. So I'm going to all they are two vertical, brownish, I think I use that color, ellipsoids. So I hold Alt and copied it over, so it looks kind of like a channel receptor. Highlight these and then go up to brush. So I'm going to click and I'm going to drag the brush up, click add. And then, so just to show what exactly I did, I clicked and held the left mouse button and I dragged it over until I saw that plus sign, and I released it. And I want this to be a scatter brush. So I'm going to say, you know what, let me just make this a pattern brush. So, okay. Okay. And I'm going to draw a line across the edge here. I'm going to make this a little curve. So it matches properly. Don't have to do all this detail, but we will anyways. Okay, so now that's quite a bit of, that's high density. We don't quite want all that. So I'm going to modify this. I'm going to double click on this. And I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to add spacing here. So let's do 100. I guess that'll work. Say okay. Apply to strokes. And there we go. And you can straighten that line out. Maybe I wanted it straight. You get the point. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is to create this postsynaptic density looking thing. Okay, so I'm going to go back into this clipping mask group. By double clicking on one of the objects, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to draw a line I want it to be kind of this green, and maybe I'll hold shift. Maybe I don't want it. I want a darker green. Alright, so yeah, that'd be fine. So I'm gonna drag it like this. So I'm copying. I'm holding the Alt button and I'm copying. And then now I want to highlight all of those. Click, click, click. There. Now I'm going to hold Alt. And then I'm going to transform, reflect on the horizontal. Say OK. So we're getting there. And then now I want to copy again. Now I want it to be a little more dense inside. So now I'm going to right click and say transform each. And I'm going to adjust, I'm going to change. So this is going to transform each individual object. Okay. So I'm going to highlight this and do 60. And then I'm going to put 60 here and say OK. Now, Control C. Now, I can just, now if I want to select all of these objects, I can just, click on one and then say, select same appearance. And so all those objects will be clicked. Okay, I want to create some more of those. So I'm going to, those smaller ones, so hold shift. So I'm holding shift and clicking those smaller objects. Then I'm going to copy them. I'm going to say transform each. Oh, no, that's what I didn't want to do. I want to right click and say transform, reflect along the horizontal, say OK. Now I want to align all of these. So again, I click on one, say select, go up here to click select, same appearance. Then I want to horizontally align to the top. Okay. Now I want to, distribute these a little better than this. So I'm gonna, play around with it just to get the way I want. This doesn't have to be exact right now. You get the idea. Maybe I don't want. There. Okay. So now I'm gonna click again, say select same appearance. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna group it because this is a pain having to do that every time. So I'm going to hold control and say, and click G. So hold control and click G. That groups the object. So now I can just click on one and it selects all of the objects within that group. Okay, so now I want to add a little bit of a blur. So go effect. So I click effect, blur, Gaussian blur. I don't want quite that much. I want it to kind of look good. So I say, okay. Now I want it to fade in to this color here. So I'm going to go to the gradient and I'm going to do linear and I'm going to do the stroke that way, linear. Okay, so now notice that the gradient on some of these lines is going to more dark in some cases. So we want to fix that. So I want to click on, so double click, I want to click on those ones that are making the mistake. And then I want to then rotate them around so that they are having the same effect as the other ones. Okay. Oh, and there's another one here. So let's get those two. This one too. Okay. Okay, now they're all going to the same direction now. Let me try to click on this again. Okay, so we want this to fade towards a more transparent. So first we need to get rid of this fill inside. So I'm gonna cancel the fill inside. And now we're going to cancel. Now I'm gonna click on the gradient and now I'm gonna make this transparent. 0. Okay. And now what we want to do is we want to make this, come on, click on this. All right, click on this again. So now we want to make this the same color as that background. So I'm going to double click on it. Then I'm going to click on this eyedropper and click on that. Okay. And then we're going to drag this out like that just to make it look a little better. And then we want to extend these out. Now the other thing is we want this to be the color of this. Okay. And then we want this to be transparent. Okay. So there, now we've got the same effect as over here. I think I used a different color. That's okay. You can play around with it to get the way you want. Okay, yeah, in fact, why don't we just go ahead and do that? Because I like that. Maybe do a color like that. Ah, there we go. So, all right, so now we've got the postsynaptic density. The next thing is we want to make this a receptor storage inside of the postsynaptic bouton. So the way we do that is we use that same symbol that we had before down here. This time we're going to draw a line that goes across this way. Notice I still have that gradient effect on the line. That's okay. I'm just going to go over here and click to the green so that's the same color as this. We want to bring this forward, so right click, arrange, bring to the front. And let's group this object, and then we're going to center these. Now I'm going to click on the brush tool. I'm going to scan to the top, and I'm going to highlight this and drag it over till I see the plus sign. So, and it's kind of the same way as we did this symbol sprayer tool before. And then we're going to go down to pattern brush. Say OK, and then you get a window that pops up. This is all fine. Say OK. Oh, actually, we've well, I wanted that line in the center in this case. So I didn't want a line before. So notice on this brush, I didn't want a line before because I didn't want it to overlay the previous line. I didn't want it to look strange. Now I really want a line. So that's why I added the line and added it as a brush. So let me make a circle. Okay, I want the inside to, so I'm just gonna use the eyedropper tool to make it look the same as the appearance as the synapse. Then I want to click on this, and you know you can keep it that density, or you can double click on it and you know change the spacing, you know, a little bit, maybe negative 50. Let's see what that looks like. It won't let me do that. Okay, so you change the spacing by changing the width of this line. So, but right now you kind of get the idea. That's the point. And you notice it distorts the image a little bit. That's kind of just what it's going to do. There's not much other than just placing the items individually. Well, there is another way you can do it. Let's do it that way. This will be instructive. So I can draw the circle. Okay. And then I can take this receptor and put it right here. Just bring it to the front. Arrange. Bring it to the front. Let's go ahead and group it. Go inside this group. So then I click on this one object. And then I can do object repeat radial. So now I can center that. I can expand. Oh, that's going to make that big. I don't want to do that. I can expand. And then, so this expands. This will make the whole thing larger, including the objects. We don't want to do that. This inner circle will change how big the circle is, but we're going to put it right about there. And then this changes the density of the objects. So there we go, that's finished. That looks better than the distorted image. Okay. And now we're gonna bring this up here a little bit. Okay, and then now we want to add the glare lastly, and that's the same as we did before. So I'm going to draw it like this. I won't make it look perfect just because you get the idea. And then, maybe something like that. And hold shift, click there, go back to appearance, go down to the bottom, opacity, we'll make this 80. And there we go. So that is close to what you see on the left. The next synaptic depiction we're going to draw is using 3D effects in order to create kind of a more three-dimensional synaptic connection. Okay, so we're gonna copy this over just so we can know what we're looking at, what we're about to create, and it's gonna be shown right there. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to copy this over. Okay. I'm going to ungroup. The only thing I want is maybe the synaptic vesicles. And also this, I guess I don't need the synaptic vesicles. Then I want to keep this shape. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it. Oh, come on. Undo, cut it. Okay, what's going on? I'm going to cut it. There. Sorry about that. And I'm going to remove the fill. I'm also going to change the color. So I'm going to change the color to, something more lighter. And then I'm going to click on this. I'm going to click on Effect, 3D, Revolve. Okay, so notice. So what it did is it revolved it around the left side. I want to revolve it around the right side. So I'm going to do the right edge. Okay, so you can see that looks much the same shape as on the left. Now I want to have an opening so I can peek inside of this this synaptic bouton. So I'm gonna move it something like that. So what this does here is it says the angle at which it stops rotating the image. Okay, so I have it right at 257. We can type it in and say 250, not 205, 250. Let's see. And then let's move it around so we can see it. So there's that. I think I want to go a little bit beyond. Let's say 300. Let's do that. Maybe not so much. 280. That seems better. Okay, good. Okay, so now let's try to pick an orientation that we like. Oh, that's not good. That's not good. Okay, I don't like any of those. Let's do a custom. Keep it rotating. Okay, and let's pick something that maybe is, a little. Let's go up a little bit. Not that much. Okay. Let's type in even numbers just to make it easy. And then we're going to say okay. Okay, that's the start of it. And now we want to fill it with the synaptic vesicles. So to do that, we first need to create a clipping mask. So, well, let's do the let's spray. Let's spray in the synaptic vesicles, and I think it's gonna be on default as the vesicles. Okay. Let's get some out here so that it looks pretty cool. Maybe something like that. Okay. A little over. Okay. Now I want to create the clipping mask. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to use the spline tool to do that. So I'm going to go over here, I call it the spline, the curvature tool to do that. So I'm going to click along this path, trying to get as close as I can. Doesn't have to be exact, but it's nice if it is. Let me switch over to the pen tool. And back over to this tool. Let me select on that path. So I double clicked on the path, so I'm isolating it so so this tool doesn't think I'm trying to draw on another line. Now the more points you draw, the closer it will be. Of course, the longer it will take to draw the line, but okay. So now I want to let's switch over to the pen tool, click on this anchor, then click on this anchor to finish it. Escape. So now we have, this will be our clipping mask. We're going to right click, and then we're going to arrange, bring to the front, hold shift and click on this object. And then now we're going to click back on this clipping mask, right click and say make clipping mask. So now it's inside, the vesicles are inside the synaptic bouton. Okay, so that's the top. Now we're going to hold Alt and drag it this way. And we're going to reflect it. So go right click, say transform, reflect along horizontal, and say okay. We're going to drag it down here. Arrange, send to back. I want to try to align it with this, but give it some space so that you can add. If you see a little bit of white in the back, that's okay. But we're gonna space it out this way. Okay, we're gonna obviously remove. We're gonna move this clipping mask because we're gonna have to redraw it on the bottom side. Okay, and the reason why is because whenever you reflected it, it changed the property a little bit. Okay, it changed the reflection. It's not an exact reproduction of what you have on top, so that clipping mask is never going to be right. No matter how you reflect it, it's never going to line up. So it's okay. We can just redraw that path. So I'm gonna get back to the spline tool, and we're gonna draw again. Again, the more points you do, the more accurate it's going to be, but more time it's going to take to draw the line. We'll switch back to the pen tool, and you have to click on that line, then click on this, click over here, go back on the spline tool. This time we're going to think ahead and double click on that line to isolate it. Now we'll go back to the curvature tool. work along here. And you'll be able to modify these lines afterwards if it doesn't quite have the effect that you want. Let's switch over to this. And connected. Okay, so now we have that path. Okay. Now we want to draw these lines here, so we can use the pencil tool. Let's click away and then draw the pencil tool, and then so we're going to click on the pencil tool, and then we're going to go over here and do, I don't know, maybe this brown. Oh, back on the pencil tool, and then these are the, you know, the cytoskeleton, something like that. Okay. Now again, we want this to be behind the clipping mask. So, oh, I selected away. Oh no. That's okay, I can just click on this object, and instead of having to click on each and every individual object, I click on that object and go up here and click select, same appearance. Oh, and then these are selected up here, plus the ones up there. Okay, well that's not going to work in this instance. That's okay, we can just click, or I can just highlight both, and then use the shift key. While clicking the shift key, I can unselect everything else. Okay, now I want to hold shift and click this clipping mask. Oh, wait, first I want to clip on this path and right click on it. So click on it with the left mouse button, then right click on it with the and then say arrange, bring to the front. Now I'm going to hold the shift key and select all these again. Click on this, right click, make clipping mask. Okay, so now they're inside. Okay, the next thing is I want to make these proteins. Okay, so to make a protein, I'm just going to maybe use the pencil tool. I'm going to zoom in, just make something that looks something like that. Solid fill, let's make it blue. Okay. And then now we are going to click on the symbol. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to drag and then add that to there. Make it a graphic. Say OK. And then I'm going to click inside this clipping mask, and then I'm going to add the spray tool, and I'm going to spray these there. Okay. Now the rotation is defined by the direction at which I am spinning. I'm going. So if I go this way, see how it curves around. So that makes it look like these are proteins that have like free motion. So I'm going to say I'm going to click on this selection tool and click away. And now we've got proteins. Okay, now I want to create the postsynaptic density. And I'm representing it here as just a filled 3D cube. So the way to do that is also to use the rotation tool. I'm gonna create a rectangle. I'm gonna make it a solid brown like this, maybe a little lighter there. It darkens it whenever it does the 3D effect. I'm not sure why, but it does. Okay, so I'm going to click on that, and first I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go inside this clipping mask and then say Control V. That way whenever I make this, it's going to be inside the object. Okay, now I'm going to do the rotation. So I'm going to go up here and click Effect, 3D, Rotate. Revolve. effect 3D revolve. And I cannot remember what we had. I think it was 280. Okay. I think this was negative 60. I think this may have been 180 or 150. 150, I think. That's not looking right. I'm not sure. Let's just say okay for right now. And what I can do is I can click on this. So I click on this object, go appearance, go down to 3D revolve, and negative 55, and that's negative 60. Or it's 160 and then negative 55. So now I'm going to click back on this object, go to 3D revolve, and what was it? Negative 155? 160? I can't remember. Or was it 180? I can't remember. That doesn't look right. 150. We'll go with that. You know what? Let's go back, and the way to do this is to click on the object, go down to 3D revolve, and then to copy this. So let's do print screen. There. And now I'm gonna look over to the side so I can see, so I can remember. So I don't have the greatest memory. Click on this and go down to 3D revolve, and negative 155, negative 160, and this was 160. Okay, there we go. So we're gonna and then we need to do the right edge. Say okay. So that was, if you remember, the last one was the right edge. Now we're gonna bring this all the way, just be maybe just something like that, and that's the postsynaptic density. Now to add these little receptors, I'm gonna zoom in. I'm going to get a ellipse, make this dark brown, and then I'm going to cut the object, and then delete that, and then delete that, and zoom in, and then we're going to join those two lines. And I'm going to take this, I'm going to convert it into a curve. I'm going to hold Alt, and that way I can move this independently. Something like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's so small that it does not have to be perfect. So I'm going to click on the object again, hold Alt, release on the mouse to copy this over, creating those receptors. Okay. And then I'm going to do something like this. It doesn't have to be exact. Just to show the individual receptors. And you can size this out so that it makes it look exactly like that, or just copy it before trimming it, move it into here so it looks better. But anyways, that's the idea, that to create a 3D synaptic connection. So in summary, we have, and my computer is running really slow because we have a lot of things drawn here, but we've gone all the way from the very simple to a simple but a complex synaptic connection, then to a slightly more morphologically accurate. Then we added a little bit of a 3D kind of effect. Then we have kind of a cartoonistic kind of 3D, more accurate morphologically, and then we get a really detailed 3D synaptic connection. So that's how you draw a synaptic connection in Adobe Illustrator.